All right, it's time for part 2 of my Judas 2020 video update. Part 2 is going to be a pretty detailed walkthrough of the car to show you where it's at right now and some of the details of what I did. I might overlay some more images like I did last time over on the side of the screen on my first video. I guess let's get into it. So, safety first. After everything that's happened, that's about half the fire extinguishers I have around the car right now. So here's Judas in my shop right now, very dirty. I've spent the last 5 years hanging out in the shop, mostly under a cover, and this is the current state of play. It's running. There's a couple of things stopping me from putting the front end back together. Mainly I'm missing my custom-made oil cooler, so that's why you see these lines hanging across the front. This is basically the outlet of the oil filter, and I had a big oil cooler that ran across here, which was a 1990 V8 Quattro oil cooler, which is a really nice thing, and somewhere in the move that got lost. So I'm trying to hunt down a new one, or a new old one, to put that in. And then this is the power steering cooler, which gets mounted up in that side, but I can't do that until I've got the other stuff. So right now, no headlights, but everything else is pretty much back together. We'll do a little walk around, and this is probably going to be a pretty long video. I'm going to nerd out a little bit, and I might cut it into sections, but we'll just show you the current status right now. So engine's in. Car's dirty, needs some cleanup. I'll come into the details of all of this stuff back here later. Interior's dirty, lots of finishing up to do, but it's an Oreo RS6. So I guess we could get into it and talk about the motor for a start. So there it is, GM LS3 based block. It's a Dart LS Next block, steel, Molnar crank, top end rods, Marley pistons, 9.2 to 1 compression, right around 6 liters. AFR 230 heads, fast 102 intake, which is mounted backwards. Custom cam that was ground specifically for this. The headers are custom fabricated. They're 1 7/8 primaries, heat wrapped. These plug leads are awesome, by the way. They're ceramic. I had problems. I burned up several sets of plug leads. If you guys are having the same problems, these are Accell's ceramic plug leads. There's nothing to burn up. And these have been through a lot of use and have proved themselves really well. So I'm going to put the car up in the air in a little bit, but I'm going to keep talking through the engine bay a little. So the problem with these Audis is that the steering rack is up high at the back here, under the firewall, so you can't push the motor too far back. And again, with drive shaft angles, you can't go too far back, which means that things are extremely tight in the front. I don't know if you can see. I'll get a flashlight in a minute and get some more detail. So in order to make this work, obviously everything was custom fabricated, mounts and everything, but getting the intake air into the motor was one of the biggest challenges. So the basic layout is this bank, the left bank, comes out, and I'll put the car in the air so you can see, but there's a 1 7/8 primaries go to a 3-inch collector right here, and then it makes a U-turn and comes forward with a 3-inch crossover pipe that runs under the oil pan. And again, I'll show you, and it comes up on this side And this bank of headers, again, 8" and 7/8 primaries, and they go to a 4" collector down in here. I definitely need to get more light. And the crossover pipe at 3" comes up and merges into that. And then the exhaust system going all the way to the back is 4". It's all stainless, back purged, TIG welded. And again, I'll show you more underneath. And then it goes to the back, turbo's back there, 3" feed line comes forward, sneaks up the back of the engine here, and then this is the 1 or 2 millimeter throttle body, and I had to build this carbon fiber Cobra head to make the turn without reducing the cross-sectional area of the charge pipe into the throttle body, and that so far has been working pretty well. Fuel system, it's a stock fuel tank, pair of 044 fuel pumps, and I got 2 -10 lines coming up feeding the 2 fuel rails. So there's a -12 out of the pump, and it comes up to the front and it splits to 2 -10s, and there's one feeding this fuel rail, another feeding this fuel rail. Going through the injectors, I can't remember how big these are. Again, I'm probably going to have to look up some information and I'll put it on the screen somewhere. And then the return lines go to the boost reference aeromotive fuel pressure regulator, and then return lines go back to the tank. This line here goes to my fluid-filled oil pressure gauge, and this is the oil pressure sensor, which is feeding the GM ECU. And I'll come to talk about ECU stuff in a moment, but let me pause for a second and get a flashlight. You got a flashlight. So hopefully this will help see a little bit what's going on. So this is the GM ECU harness coming up, and then cooling system. This is the stock RS6 radiator, and it's pushed way forward. So again, trying to show you how tight things are in here. Probably easier to show you from underneath the car, but lots of cutting and modifying. You know, this little bracket here pushes the radiator forward. It's a tight fit, but it does fit. And then down in here, we have the electric water pump. So this is the Messier electric water pump. Obviously the big feed line here, bottom of the radiator, and then there are 4 lines that go to the front of the motor. Again, I'll put some pictures up of that. And then the rest of the coolant system is obviously, this is my thermostat housing. These 2 lines go to feed the heater core, and then this little short line here goes to a catch can. So all pretty straightforward stuff. It's also retaining the factory coolant overflow pressure bottle, which is relocated into a different place. Brake servo. This box here is the factory Audi ECU enclosure. I do retain the factory ECU, but it was modified by my friends Nate and Javad over at 034. One of the problems of doing this LS swap into the Audi is getting all the instruments and the ABS and everything else to work. Speaking of ABS, so the way I did this is that the engine is actually controlled by a GM ECU, and I tune it using HP tuners, and the GM ECU is hidden up under the dash. The engine has basically 2 complete sets of sensors. It has a set of sensors that the GM harness plugs into. It's a custom harness, but effectively the GM. And then it has a full secondary set of sensors that feed the Audi ECU, which is in there. And the Audi ECU was modified so that it thinks it's running the motor, but it really isn't. But the dash and everything works correctly. ABS works correctly. So there's a lot of sensors in this motor to make this work, and a lot of wiring. That was probably one of the biggest challenges here was getting all that to work. And again, I'll show you the ECU and some of the wiring a little later. Other things to note, this little guy here, that's my clutch bleed hose, remote clutch bleed hose, because it's really tight down in there. so I can put my pressure bleeder on it and bleed the clutch, which I haven't done yet. And then crankcase ventilation. This is my MAN Pro Vent, which is a cyclonic. If you guys haven't seen these, they're pretty cool. It looks kind of factory. It's a cyclonic oil separator, which has an inbuilt filter. And then anything that all the vapor gets filtered and the liquid oil runs down, there's a line that comes out of there at the bottom, and you can either plumb that back into the oil pan. I don't. I have just a stopcock on it, so I periodically check it. And then it has a one-way valve here that controls the airflow. And then I have two AN10 lines. That's not helping. Two AN10 lines, one on each valve cover. And these are teed and feed into this MAN Pro Vent. At some point over the winter, one of the changes I want to make over the winter is currently I have an AC pump in the car. I decided to strip that out, and I'm going to replace that with a mechanical crankcase vacuum pump to try and improve ring seal and all that sort of stuff. What else is going on in here? So we were talking about ECUs and electronics a little bit. So this array of bird's nest here, which needs a little cleanup. These are my PLX smart gauge sender units. So these are AFR, boost. This is fluid pressure, so this is oil pressure, coolant pressure, coolant temp. This is a vacuum boost sensor, which I have hooked up to, that runs over to this port on the valve cover, so I can monitor crankcase vacuum and pressure. And then this one is EGT. So this EGT probe, it's just a single probe, but it's down there, right next to the wideband. So the EGT is a small sensor, and then this is the PLX. This is one of the wideband sensors. There are 3 on the car. There's one in each bank, and then there's one down after the merge collector. And all those sensor modules, they come through. We'll go inside real quick. Oh, that's my flashlight, which I'm going to need. Sorry for the Blair Witch camera motion. So we come over to the passenger side, and again, this is kind of messy right now, but so that is the PLX display module, and it feeds. I have three PLX gauges over there. I'll show you those a little later. But up in here, that's the fuse block for the GM ECU and engine management, and the ECU is tucked up behind the box there. So I made this kind of neat area for the fuses and relays for the motor, and that again is my PLX. I have an OBD splitter. One side of the OBD splitter is going to my HP tuners module right here, that I plug into my laptop for tuning and data logging. The other one goes to the PLX module, and I can display on one of the gauges anything that the OBD can see. Other things to note in here, this is my TurboSmart boost controller, and again, here's the 3 PLX gauges. This one in the middle is my primary one. That one over there, each of these gauges are touchscreen, and I can change them to do various things, but this one I have programmed with a bunch of alarms for oil pressure and fuel pressure, water temperature, etc. So that's kind of that. I think next step is I've got to put it up in the air and walk you through the details underneath. Be right back. Some more stuff here. So come around this side. So Again, things are packed in pretty tight, but here's the Canton Drift oil pan, and you can see the bottom of, this is the alternator. Lots of plumbing running through here. Here are the engine mounts, and looking up, I'm going to try and show you this. So this is the header up in here, and it comes back. Let's see if I can get a shot of this. Yeah, so it comes back, and it does a 90-degree turn right there, and you can see there's another O2 sensor. It does a 90. It comes forward, and that's the crossover that's going over to the other side. Get back here, and it snakes its way up through the subframe on this side, underneath the engine mount, and it merges right here into the bottom of the 4-inch collector, and then goes out to the back. Here's one of the front drive shafts, and you can see, I don't know if you can see, but it's probably 15 degrees pointed forwards, and then as we look back, obviously, here's the exhaust running to the back, and I'll walk backwards a little later. I modified the Canton oil pan. This is when I mentioned earlier the two sets of sensors. That sensor there I cut and let in is the Audi OEM oil level and temperature sensor. So that's feeding the Audi ECU, which can then report on the Audi dashboard oil level and temperature warnings. And this is the AC pump, which I'm going to delete at some point and replace with a mechanical vacuum pump. I'm just backing out, so I had to make this aluminum radiator support, and these mounts here are for the oil cooler that I'm missing. So if we backtrack this line here, this is the oil feed line out of the oil cooler, sorry, out of the oil filter, and this is the oil filter up here, which is a Moroso oil filter block. Really nice. It has two 12AN inlet ports and a 10AN inlet port, which I'm using for a sensor, and it has a 12AN outlet and a -6 outlet. So this line, this is the main outlet from the oil cooler. Whoa, that's not good. That shouldn't be live. Oh, learn something new every day. And this is the turbo feed line here, which runs across, and it's tied into this. And again, previously I had this set up that this taps off of the oil cooler, so the oil going back to the rear mount turbos has been through the big cooler before it goes to the back of the car. And then this line, which is coming from the oil cooler, sneaks through the subframe, ends up over here, and you really just can't see that I have again a Moroso takeoff to remove the oil filter housing, which is normally up in here. Get some light, which is normally up in there, and that's where I deal with the connection to the engine. This orange guy here, this is the adapter plate to adapt the GM engine to the 01E Audi transmission. You can see it's pretty thick. I think in a next iteration I could probably thin it down some. Starter motor is buried up in there. You can see that bolt. Let me get my camera right here. That bolt head right there is the outer one of the starter. So the starter is heavily wrapped in heat protecting material. And that's the front of the starter up there. That's probably the hardest thing on the car to service because of this cross-flow pipe. Access isn't great, but it's manageable. So again, other things down here. Now this is the Messier water pump with this is the bottom of the radiator right here. I retained the Audi clip-in radiator connections, and this is, these are the two lines in and out for the pump. So what else is going on here? So this is the Audi O1E transmission, Quattro transmission. Front drive shafts, I'll get low down here. So you can see my engine, my transmission mounts are angled like that because that's how far I push the engine back. Normally those would go straight out to the mounts, but I pushed the whole engine and transmission way back to be able to make this fit. And you can, it's hard to tell, but you can see that the drive shafts are pushed forward. The transmission is one that friend Scott built for me. It's basically as rugged as you can make this thing without going to straight cut dog box. It's a Euro TDI transmission, which means it has a very long 6 gear. It also has the front differential cooler pump, and this line goes out to the cooler that's built into the RS6 radiator for the auto transmission. We never got these cars with a manual here in the US. So this is the feed, this is a return. So this pump pushes transmission fluid out to the front, and then it comes back and it feeds into a part here and the center differential. So we've got active cooling in the transmission. And of course, all of this took a lot of work. Some other interesting things here that I could try and show you. Again, talking back about sensors, the amount of sensors on the car. So looking back down the transmission, we come to the back of the transmission. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show you. Yeah, right there. So that's the output shaft of the back of the trans. And that little coil there is a Hall effect sensor. And it's reading 6 magnets that I bonded onto the output shaft and safety wired, and that's the speed pickup, the vehicle speed pickup for the GM ECU. And the Audi ECU uses the factory location. So the dashboard is reading the Audi sensor, and the GM ECU is reading this sensor to get actual road speed. So we could probably keep going towards the back. So this is the 4-inch exhaust. For reference, I have pretty big hands. This is, you all know 4-inch exhaust is big. And if we follow the exhaust to the back of the car, let me move my light here. As we follow the exhaust to the back of the car, so the 4-inch, when it gets to here, splits into 2 2.5s. So one 2.5-inch runs this way. Let me get down low so you can see better. So one side feeds into this driver's side precision turbo, and then the other side snakes over and feeds that rear mount precision turbo. Sorry, auto drain on my compressor. In the middle is this fabricated air-to-air intercooler. So the coming back to the exhaust, I have a 60mm tile wastegate right there, and that's connected up to the Turbo Smart controller, which is linked to the gauge and controller up to the front. So the hot side is pretty basic. 4-inch pipe comes back, splits to dual 2.5s, and feeds the 2 turbos. Here's the hot side feed, hot side turbine feed, and then goes around the turbine. And then this is my exhaust tip, and this is one of the cool things. We look in here. That's looking into my exhaust, which is kind of neat. And then over on the other side, kind of the same deal. So hot side feed with a bunch of heat wrap and heat shielding. Hot side feed comes into the turbine and comes right out of the exhaust tip. And then cold side comes out of the turbo right here through this finned connector and into the bottom of the that side of the intercooler, and the other side does the same. And then the intercooler outlet is centered at the top, and get a better shot. It's centered at the top and then comes out. We go to another finned cooler, and then I have this 3-inch charge feed that goes back up to the front. And I used to have my blow-off valve mounted down here, but I moved it up closer to the throttle body for better response. So I have a CNC machined little cap off there, and then up in there is where the charge pipe goes up, and it's really hard to get any shot in there. The charge pipe goes up, and my blow-off valve is up by the throttle body, and I'll just put pictures up of that. So let's come back to the back again. So, change my light. So I'll talk about fluids next. So up in the tunnel here, that black line is a -6 oil feed, which comes up to that splitter right there, the red part. And then out of that splitter, I have a 4AN line, which is coming through and feeding the turbo on each side. And this side, it's hard to show you, this side has a pressure switch in line. Auto drain again. So my compressor kicked in, so I stopped the video, so there'll be an edit there. But this feed line on this side has a pressure switch. The other, from the split there, the Y split, the other turbo oil feed is right there. And then to try and keep things compact, the oil drains, we'll go to this side. So I made these oil drain blocks which bolt onto the bottom of the turbo. And this is the return line here, which loops up and around, actually comes over and it tees here. And this is the EXA oil return pump, which has a bracket welded onto the aluminum subframe and rubber mounts on that return pump. And the other return line comes up and tees into this. And then this is the return line to the engine, which goes and tucks up into the tunnel above the drive shaft. And there's some check valves in there, in that line. The other thing I did on these blocks is I put in an oil window. So when the car's running, I can see whether the pump is scavenging the turbos properly. And I have a couple of other ports on here, so that I can, if I want to, monitor that. And then this is another port that I can tap into if I need to. So that's the oil return or oiling system back here. And I'll go back up at the front. That line, that return line, ties it into the oil pan and returns the oil to the engine. On the cold side, the intercooler has a pair of electric fans on it, and I have a thermocouple back here that turns those fans on when the IAT gets up there. So the pressure switch I mentioned on the turbo, that guy up there, is also connected to a bunch of stuff in the trunk I'll show you in a minute. And when that pressure switch sees pressure, it turns on this EXA pump. And then if there's no pressure, it turns the pump off. So it's kind of all automated. So yeah, that's pretty much the rear mount turbo setup. Again, I have some cleanup to do back here. And the intent has always been to build an aluminum belly pan for this thing, to direct airflow to the intercooler up here. One of the changes I'm going to make over the winter, probably, is I'm going to change this intercooler setup out for an air to water setup, which I think is going to be better. The only other thing to show you back here is on the fuel system. So this is the factory Audi tank. So what I did up here, this is where I have the two 044 fuel pumps, and I made some manifold to tie them together. So the fuel comes out of the tank through both pumps. This is the feed line to the engine, comes up through this trick flow non-return valve, and then there's a 12. That's where the 12 AN line goes up to the motor. It runs up in the tunnel, and then it Y's right here. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the Y for the fuel, and then the black line there, the shiny black line, is one of the two feed lines for the motor. So I think that's probably it. You know, the car's running KWV3 coilovers, really nice. Factory RS6 brakes, which are awesome. Now I've got some good pads. I have Hotchkiss sway bars front and rear. And I think now I can pull the car down and show you what's going on in the trunk. Right, so junk in the trunk. So something I didn't mention before is that I cut out the spare wheel well in the trunk and welded in a bead rolled flat trunk floor. And that's how I got the space for the intercoolers and everything. Sorry, blow off valve again on the compressor. It's gone air dryer. So that's how I got the space for the intercooler and everything under the trunk floor. Cut the floor out, dynamited the inside, heat shielded the other side of the trunk floor. This is the factory RS6 battery location, but the electronics that are controlling all of the stuff in the back are in this side here. So fuse block, relays, switches. What's going on here? So this is my manual. If I want to run the fuel pump manually, now I can run the fuel pumps. So yeah, this is a switch that allows me to run the fuel pumps manually. And you can't see with the light, but if I turn this light away, these are two switches for the individual pumps. And they only work when the thing's running. And then this switch here is the EXA oil pump, so I can run that manually. And this switch is manual override for the intercooler fans. Pretty straightforward. The other thing that's going on in here is I have a pair of manual boost gauges, and I use those when the car's on the dyno to make sure that the turbos are balanced. And then this is the other side, the other quarter panel area, and this is where I'm going to put my my pump and my tank for the air to water intercooler. I'll build a custom tank and set up in here, so when I change from air to air to water, that's where the reservoir and the pump will be, and then I'll have the radiator underneath and the air to water intercooler hard up against the trunk floor. So that just about concludes the walk around. If there's anything in particular you want more details on, let me know. The next portion of this video is going to be firing up the car, so you can check it out when it's running. But for now, I'm going to put this up on the web.